The news so many of us have waited for is getting ever closer. But a big boost heard from Mikel Arteta yesterday, only brought out later last night. We're going to talk about that and plenty more about Bukayo Saka in today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. Incredibly appreciated as always. I hope you've had a fantastic week and, of course, that you're now ready for the weekend. It is indeed here. Arsenal will have to wait until tomorrow, of course, as we take on Chelsea in the final Premier League game for more than a fortnight. With 2 weeks to go before they're going against Fulham at the start of April. But plenty of time for rest, recuperation for some. Of course, the international awaits for others. But April's set to be a massive month for Arsenal with a Real Madrid tie, both home and away in the Champions League quarterfinals. But also, of course, the run-in with whatever is left domestically for the club to get their hands on. Looks slim, but a job still needs to be done. And, of course, I think they can probably put to bed those top four fears with a win over Chelsea on Sunday. We'll talk more about that game tomorrow morning, but we've got plenty of news to talk through this morning. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box: Barry, Carlton, Arasilki, Paul, Temi, Ronald, Turnbull. We've got Maximius, Black Shine, Steve, Gooner 76, Zoom, Stephen, Shari, Scouse, Gooner, Brian, Matt G, Stevie, Lee, Martin, Loga, Roy. Plenty more of you guys and girls in the chat box as well. Thank you all for being here. Please do drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on. So indeed, of course, you can tune in. And I'm curious to answer some of your questions as well. Make sure you're dropping them in. I'll try and star them if I can see them, but otherwise wait until part two and I'll drop some of those into the chat for you guys to hear some answers for. Right, let's jump into today's stories, though. We begin with last night's WSL victory, back to winning ways after elimination from the Women's FA Cup. Goals from Alessia Russo and an own goal from Maren Mejda saw Arsenal collect all 3 points as they continue to try and build momentum in the league. It's, of course, the league at this point is looking exceptionally unlikely. They're 8 points behind first placed Chelsea, but they need to continue to try and keep that gap to Manchester City in fourth place. They're level on points with Manchester United, who are currently in third place. They need to make sure that they're getting the results that they need. And with Manchester United, of course, losing in their most recent fixture against Liverpool yesterday, that enabled them to move up into second place in the table and hoping to put themselves solidly into Champions League qualification, of course, for next season, as well as Renee Slegers only has really one trophy left, which is the European trophy. Arsenal women taking on, guess who? Real Madrid in the next round of the competition as well. Both of Arsenal's men's and women's teams will be playing at the Emirates. Of course, if you want to go to that fixture against Real Madrid for the women's game, that's on Wednesday, March 26th. Of course, the men's team playing in April. So if you want to get a little bit of an insight into what it's like playing Real Madrid at the Emirates, well, you can go and watch the women play, as I say, on Wednesday, 26th of March. Tickets, of course, are available on the Arsenal website. Go and grab them. The first leg, that is the second leg, by the way. The first leg is being played on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday in Spain at the Estadio Alfredo Di Stefano. So make sure if you're able to go out there. Prepare for next month's men's sides as well, going to the Bernabeu, of course. The youth team also in action, and Nathan Butler-Oyedeji scoring twice for Arsenal's under-21s. Of course, he's rarely been able to get on the score sheet for the Gunners, for the senior side. He's been able to get on the appearance sheet for the Gunners, but managed to get a couple of goals yesterday while playing for the under 21s. Sorry, I don't know what am I having an absolute nightmare here? Because I swear that it was, yes, there was the Premier League 2, but I'm looking on this screen here and I think that it's just a mistake, isn't it? It's definitely a mistake. I'm watching this the slides of the Arsenal Academy Twitter account, and when you get to half time it says the under 18s, but I think that was just a typo. It really threw me off for a second. But 2 first half goals for Nathan Butler-Oyedeji for the under 21s, grabbing them a 2-1 victory against Everton. So he's getting minutes, he's scoring, he just can't play for the senior side. And I think we know the reasons as to why. I think we talked a little bit about that yesterday. But playing for the under 21s there with Gabriel Martinelli now back in the squad, minutes are going to become even less frequent for him, if even at all, if he's even in the squad for the game against Chelsea on Sunday. Moving forwards again into transfer news, I've got suspicions about this Leroy Sane thing, right? So let me tell you what my suspicions lie. You'll, of course, remember that there were links to Joshua Kimmich as recently as a few weeks ago. A few weeks after those links emerged with Joshua Kimmich, Kimmich has now signed a new contract with Bayern Munich. Leroy Sane is also said to be in discussions with Bayern over a brand new contract, and yet we're seeing reports from Germany suggesting that Arsenal are interested. Now, I've heard nothing to suggest that Arsenal are interested in Leroy Sane. I have a suspicion that this is very much Arsenal maybe again being used as some kind of let's panic Bayern and force them into giving a player a contract because they threaten to lose one of them to a European rival. So I'm giving you the warning. Just be cautious, I think, around a lot of these links. I know this is going to happen, of course, always. But Leroy Sane being linked, according to Bild, with a move to Arsenal, but also said to be in contract negotiations with Bayern to renew his deal. I don't think he's the right player for Arsenal. There's too many injuries, too many inconsistencies in his form, and I think Arsenal need to go for a younger profile like a Nico Williams anyway. That's certainly what I would be looking to do were I in that position of making those transfer decisions. I'd rather a Nico Williams over a Leroy Sane. That's just the way I would go forward with it. But yeah, I've got some suspicions about some of these links that are emerging at the moment regarding Arsenal, and Sane is at the forefront of that. Now, Mikel Arteta conducted his press conference yesterday. There was two sections, of course, as always at the press conference. I saw a question actually from Owen in the chat who said, what's the purpose of the embargoed section of the presser? Why does it benefit, and what would happen if a journalist broke the embargo? So the reason why the presser is split into two is that you have the broadcast section, which goes out as Mikel is speaking. That's what we do a live blog for on the Football.London website. We also do the Every Word, of course, getting it out first before anyone else on the interweb. So if you want to read back every single word from the broadcast section, that is always going up very swiftly after the press conference, usually within about 20 minutes or so of Arteta speaking. And we're going to go through some of those words, of course, this morning. But then there is a second part of the press conference, which is for the newspapers. So the newspapers will have their morning lines, which are embargoed. The quotes are embargoed until later on in the day, 10:30 usually. For yesterday's, it was 10:30 last night, but those quotes will be used in the morning papers. So those kind of separation is designed for that. It is a concept that's kind of these days, as most things are online. Like back in the day, if quotes were embargoed until 10:30, the morning papers, you would wait until the morning paper to be able to read those quotes. But these days, because everything is online, you know, the Evening Standard or even ourselves at FL, or, you know, you will see those quotes up there at 10:30, at 11 o'clock at night. They will be up on those websites, you know. So it's kind of an outdated thing. I think there's often, I hear sometimes discussions about whether or not we just get rid of the embargo. It's never been followed through on as of yet. But or at least maybe embargo them for a different time the next day so that the quotes have more relevance and aren't going out at a ridiculous time in the evening. But that's the reason for the embargo, is for the morning physical papers at times. But as I say, it goes out anyway online and almost makes it feel a little bit redundant. If someone was to break the embargo, I've never known someone to break the embargo of kind of that specific section yet. I've known embargoes to be broken by accident in certain situations where you have kind of like new journalists on the block, or, you know, someone not sending the right message through at times. And there's not like to my knowledge, I've never been in that situation, but to my knowledge, there's not kind of any kind of major punishment I've known of. But I imagine that from an Arsenal perspective, would you be able to keep coming back to press conferences if you were known as somebody that was breaking embargoes? Probably not. So I guess it's kind of like, it's not like, I don't think it's like a law to my knowledge. It's just kind of an embargo in the sense that maybe there could be some legal ramifications. I'm not sure. As I say, I've never known it to happen. So, but yeah, you're unlikely to get invited back if you keep breaking embargoes, I guess. Would be the answer to that. But that some people feel that embargoes are a bit outdated these days, but they do have their purpose. So going into Arteta's press conference and some of the things he spoke, obviously the big news of the day was the Miles Lewis-Skelly being called up for the England squad, and he said, "I'm very proud of him. It's a huge moment for him and for the club as well. One of our graduates getting the call for England. It's a massive thing." And I loved Simon's questioning on this. Simon Collins, the Evening Standard, talking about if you remember that picture of Cole Jenkinson, Aaron Ramsey, Jack Wilshere, Theo Walcott and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain all signing new contracts. It was kind of the British core that Arsenal had during that time. And Simon asked him about that picture of the British core and how important that is now. Of course, Arsenal got quite a strong British core. We've got young players, of course, in Saka and Nwaneri and Lewis-Skelly, but we've also got some more experienced heads like Declan Rice and Ben White also in the group as well. I think that's great. I think it attaches people to the football club. It makes them proud. I think everybody wants to see the academy players and English players driving and being the face of the football club. I think it's really important. I think it has to happen organically. You cannot force it, especially with those two. Now it's really good news because they deserve to be where they are. They are doing great, and there's a bright future ahead of them. And as well, and there was also another section where he talked about. He said it's very important, I think, culturally. I think because our history and we're an English club, to have that DNA that represents us as a club, and then having a lot of academy players as well. I think it's something very, very positive, and so I'm very proud of that. And I think it's important, for Arsenal to have an English core. To have that element, if you like, to it. So I'm glad that is. It's have it being an English club, having a homegrown quota, non-homegrown quota, I should say, of course, as well, is key to have that. But it's obviously a positive thing. As an English club, you want to help the England national team as well, and have that bedrock. So it's important. In terms of what I asked Arteta, I mentioned that obviously with Nwaneri being called up to the 21s and Lewis-Skelly being called up to the senior England squad, they've kind of been separated. And I spoke to Adam Birchall a couple of weeks ago, the Arsenal under-18s head coach, with a number of other journalists at the training ground. And one of the things that he said that I found really interesting is that you want to keep them separate. It's important not to think of Nwaneri and Lewis-Skelly as a pair. It's coincidental that they've come through at the same time and they kind of had their breakout season together. But Adam Birchall talked about how it's important to keep them separate. And so I asked if the fact that they have been separated by this call up to two separate different England squads in some ways will help them develop apart for a period, playing with different teams, playing separate. They've come through like England ranks together. And so there's a value in them developing separately as well as together. And he said, yeah, any comparison there I don't think is right. I think they have a very similar pathway because obviously they've played so many years together. But after that, they're going to have different moments and each career will be unique and individual for them. And they're going to have to earn it. And what one does is not going to reflect or affect the other one in a positive or negative way. So that needs to be totally independent. It's great. It's a luxury to have someone that you spend so much time, trust, and love next to on your journey. Use it in that way. That's it. And the rest, throw it away. That I think is... And I was really happy with the answer that he gave to that question. It was detailed. It was kind of, using words like unique and those development pathways, keeping them separate, thinking them as individuals, not as a pair, not as if one fails, the other fails. If one succeeds, the other has to succeed. If one's playing, the other has to play. It's very easy to think of them as just these two players that have come through at the same time. And actually it is, as Adam Birchall told us a couple of weeks ago, it's important to think about them separately and consider them separately as players. And so I wanted to put that to Arteta, and I thought the answer was good. I also asked about the fact that Gabriel Martinelli returning means, of course, he's got more options in the forward line. Does it bring an end to the Mikel Merino experiment? And he said, no, now we have more options. But it's true that we have to really manage the load of Martinelli. And he's been a little bit ahead of schedule. And that's what we didn't want to take. And we don't want to take any more risks with him loading in with more minutes. So it may not be that Martinelli starts on Sunday, but of course we will expect to see Martinelli starting very soon. And of course, I think that would bring an end to the Mikel Merino experiment. I think that Mikel Merino at centre forward works in a very small period. And that small period for me is the Leicester game. Coming off the bench when you need a goal, when you're throwing balls into the box, that's when you want Merino in that position, right? That's when you need him. From the start, I don't think it works. It's very rarely worked. It doesn't look like it's worked. And so having Martinelli back, I want to see a front three of Nwaneri, Trossard, and Martinelli. That's what I'd like to see. And when Saka's back, I want to see a front three of Saka, Nwaneri on the left, and Martinelli through the middle. That's what I want to see when Saka eventually comes back and Trossard coming off the bench. But I think that Merino can now be again used with Martinelli back as that impact player, as that Fellaini type player. And I think Jay's already put it in the chat. That Fellaini type figure. You know, when you're desperate need of a goal, if you're drawing with Real Madrid in the dying seconds and you want to throw a guy on to get you a goal, Mikel Merino, do it. I don't care if he's scoring against Leicester or Real Madrid in the final moments of games. If he's picking you up points or picking you up wins, that's all that matters. And so for that reason, I think that's his role in the rest of this season. He's a midfielder by trade. That will be his role in the long term when we get players back, when we make signings in the summer. But at the moment, his role in this team is to be an impact, and I don't want to see him starting at centre forward. I just don't think it gets the best from him. I don't think it suits his game style in that position. He's not a striker anyway, but I think that it's important that we use him in those positions sparingly, not in ways in which we're overdoing it. And I think that's really important. Now, Mikel Arteta did talk about, we talked about Lewis Skelly, but he did talk about in the embargoed section, which of course came out late last night, he talked more about Saka. Now, in the broadcast section, he did make a small reference to Bukayo Saka. He says he's getting closer, he's stepping up and making a very good progress, I would say. So let's see when we start to throw him in with the team, how he reacts and how he can fit, how fit he can get quickly. Now, that was quite a standard answer for the broadcast section. But for those of you that didn't see or haven't yet read or watched or witnessed the embargoed section, Arteta spoke a little bit more about Bukayo Saka. And he said he's going to be here. He was asked what Saka's going to be doing next week. He said he's going to be here at the Arsenal training ground, hopefully more with the ball at his feet than he has had. That will mean he is passing the ball and shooting and running and everything. He has done quite a lot already on the pitch, working on his own. Next, we need to arrange it with people around him in a more competitive training session to see how he goes with that. He's getting closer. He's stepping up and making very good progress. So let's see when we start to throw him in with the team, which is a really big boost to where we're at with Saka and his potential return. The fact that he's done already quite a lot on the pitch, the fact that he's already done a lot individually, that he's already working with the ball and has been working with the ball for a while, and now he's going to be starting to throw into training and with other players and in more competitive settings. I imagine he'll probably get some minutes with the under-21s at some point as he gradually builds back that fitness and builds back that match readiness. There is a real hope, there's a real desire to see him back for those games against Real Madrid, if that's possible. In terms of Arsenal's fixtures after the international break, of course, they've got Fulham on the 1st of April. They've got Everton on the 5th of April. And then they've got that home leg against Real Madrid on the 8th of April. That's more than 3 weeks away right now, that game against Real Madrid. It gives Arsenal 3 weeks to see if we can get back Saka. If indeed not for the first leg, the second would be 4 weeks away, just over, so more than a month away. I think that gives a reasonable amount of time. And so I think that's a really positive boost for Arsenal right now. Not only that, but Mikel Arteta was asked a little bit more about Ben White. And in that section about Ben White, there was some really, really interesting stuff, particularly from the, as I say, from the embargoed section around Ben White, because Thomas Tuchel did and was very open to the fact that we may see Ben White back with the England squad. He was asked about the weight being lifted. Now he's back in kind of that frame, and he says yes, but I don't know. Whatever the outcome is, what I want is Ben to be happy, that he feels fulfilled, and he really needs and he really feels his next decision. And knowing Ben, his decision is not going to be influenced by somebody else. He really needs to feel it. If they found that chemistry between Thomas and him, that's great. If he wants to come and Thomas wants him, great, because he has the level and certainly the potential in his career to achieve great things with the national team. That was a question that Jordan Davis from the Sun asked. We then had a question from John West as well, who asked more about Ben White. And it was these questions that really did open up kind of Arteta more than we've ever seen him talk before about Ben White. He was asked about coming back to England being controversial with some simply because he was perceived to have turned his back on his country. How can you as his club manager deal with this storm, this pressure, or does he not care? And he was asked and said, it's just opinion. I can tell you because I was very involved in the moment that happened, and I know how Ben felt. And that was, for me, very, very clear the reason why he made that decision, how he was feeling about it and how he was struggling. It certainly wasn't about that, as in turning your back on the country. It was about being the opposite, just facing the situation and saying, I cannot handle it now, and I am not the best person to represent the country the way I feel right now. So for me, it was completely the opposite. I think not a lot of people would do it. What a lot of people would do is hide in that context, in that environment, and let time go and nobody talk about it. What he did, in my opinion, was very brave, and not a lot of people would have done it. So what Arteta is effectively saying is that whatever happened, and, you know, we've heard stories about what happened during that period with alleged, you know, confrontations with Holland and stuff like this. What we've heard is that whatever went down, Ben White was very uncomfortable in that situation and that wasn't very happy in that situation. And he felt that he personally could not give his absolute utmost to his country while representing England. And so in his decision, decided to take himself away from it. During that period, while that coaching staff, whatever, was in place, he didn't feel comfortable that he could personally give his absolute 100% utmost to his country. And as Arteta says, that is a brave decision for somebody to take, because naturally there's going to be backlash. There is going to be people out there that are short-sighted, people out there that do not care about the nuances of this conversation and will just bluntly go out and say he's turned his back on his country, it's a disgrace, blah, 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 blah. The reality is that he personally took the decision because he felt he could not give his absolute utmost. And instead of letting his country down in a way of performing under his level because he knew that he couldn't deliver that during the scenario, during the environment, the scenario that he found himself in, he decided to take himself away from that, which I agree with Arteta is honourable. Now, he was also put to him by John that Stuart Pearce had said today that if someone lets you down once, they will let you down again. Wrong to apply that to the Ben White England situation then, as in, was he wrong to say that? And Arteta says, from what I understand the reasons, it wasn't about letting somebody down. He was just telling somebody, I don't want to let you down, and this is the way I feel. I think it's very difficult for me to give you what you need. So it was very completely different. For me, what Stuart Pearce has said is disgusting, quite frankly. Like, to be completely uninvolved in that situation, to have absolutely no understanding, not being there, not having seen what happened, not knowing what happened, not hearing either side of the story, or at least definitely not one side of the story, and to come back and say he has let his country down, or he has let you down once, or to insinuate that he's let them down, and so there's a chance that he may do that again. Who is he to know what goes on in that situation? He doesn't know what's happened in that situation. It's just ridiculous that Ben's decision to, as Arteta explains it, take himself away so that in a situation where something has happened, where he has affected him and he feels that he cannot deliver his absolute best, instead of delivering subpar performances as a result of him feeling uncomfortable in the situation that he's been involved in, he's taken himself away from that. Now that that situation has been resolved, now that that situation has moved on, he has decided, it seems, what we are, taking from what Thomas Tuchel is saying, to return to that situation because he now feels that he can give his absolute utmost to his country, to the national team. And the fact that that is being used as a stick to beat him with is entirely unsurprising and entirely unacceptable. So I personally hope that Ben White goes back. As an England fan myself, I hope he has massive success with the England team. I hope that he does really, really well. I'm an Arsenal fan first. I'm an England fan second, always, and I prioritise Arsenal over England any day of the week. But I still want him to have a successful career. I've got a lot of time for Ben White. He may not have a lot of time for the media at times, but I personally have a lot of time for Ben White. I have a lot of respect for him, a lot of respect for his performances, for his level, his ability, what he's contributed to Arsenal as a footballer. And I personally think that it's ridiculous, some of the things that have been spoken about Ben White, some of the people talk about him being a supposed coward running away from England. The only cowards in this situation are the people that have got such strong opinions against him without even knowing what has gone down properly, without hearing both sides of the story, without taking into account the words that we've heard already from Arteta here, or even waiting for more evidence to come out before slamming the guy. That is the worst part of this whole thing. But that is the world that we live in. That is just the quick, bite-sized new clip, must have an opinion. The more controversial you are, the more airtime you get, that type of thing. So, yeah. And I agree, timestamp guy, he might get booed. He very much might get booed. He may get booed. And the reason why Ben White may get booed if he steps onto that field playing for England is because people are like Stuart Pearce. Some people are out there are not willing to hear that story, are not willing to understand, are not willing to get that for them, football is binary. Playing for your team, turning down the national team, walking away from the team, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. It's binary. If you walk away, you're dead to us. That's how some people are these days, unfortunately. That's the society we unfortunately live in. It's so very black and white, binary, yes, no, out, in, whatever. And sadly, some people are that way inclined. And so there is a good chance that, yes, he could get booed. But I sincerely hope that he gets cheered by a significant section. And I hope especially the Arsenal fans that go to those England games will show Ben White the absolute utmost and try to galvanise support around him. Does he need to come out and have a conversation? I think it would help, but he doesn't have to. I think it would really help if he had a sit-down chat with somebody, explain the situation. I think that would be really enlightening and maybe endear him to some. But in all honesty, I know that for a significant portion of people, no matter what Ben White says, some people aren't going to change their minds. They are already made up on it because it's a pride thing. It's a patriotism thing. So, and unfortunately, that's never going to change things. And Arthur says it doesn't help. He's an Arsenal fan. Of course, I agree to an element as well. So, yeah, I think that also in itself is not going to help too. Anyway, that's quite a large section for part one. So let's jump to part two. Your questions and more right after this. All right, this is part two of the show where we jump into the chat box and tackle some of your questions. So if you've indeed got any that you'd like to throw into the chat box, now is the time to do so. Use a big capital Q, and it really does help me spot them amongst the other questions as well. Let's scroll up a little bit. Clive says, Mourinho has done a great job. That first goal versus PSV, take a look at his role in that goal. He has helped with our structure. Clive, I disagree. I don't think Mourinho has done a great job. I think Mourinho has done a job. A great job would have been doing more than he has currently. He didn't have a good game. I mean, against PSV in the second leg, he didn't have a good game. Against Manchester United, he didn't have a good game. Against PSV away, yes, his goal that he scored against PSV, his role in that goal was important. What he did in that moment was good. But outside of that, and outside of the goals against Leicester, the West Ham game, he didn't have a good game. I can't agree personally that Mikel Arteta has done a great job. But at the same time, I absolutely understand why he's not done a great job, because he's not a centre forward. That's not his position. He is in the context of him playing a role that he's never played. He's done a good job because I had zero expectations. So arguably, he's done what I thought he would do, which is be a bit disappointing, and also more than that, which is score and help the team in other ways and be, and link up play. He has done what he could do. he has done within context anything that he could do in a position that is not his, that he can play. I can't sit here with a straight face and say I think he's done a great job, because I don't think he's done a great job personally. I think he's done a job. It's a needs must situation. It's a situation that has been forced upon us because of injuries and unfortunately mistakes in the transfer window that we are now dealing with as a result. And I sincerely hope that if we are to use him in situations at centre forward in the future, that we do so in scenarios whereby, like Leicester, you need a goal, bring him on for 10 minutes. Keep him in the box. Don't overcomplicate his game. Keep it simple. Keep him in the box. Get him on the end of crosses. That for me is Mikel Arteta. So I don't like disagreeing with Clive, but I do personally disagree here. I don't think he's done a great job. I think he's done a job, and that's just the bottom line for me. There's context to it, absolutely, and I think I've tried to explain that. But I think that between now and the end of the season, he has got a role to play in that position, but not for me in the way in which he has done. I think there's been too many poor performances, and I don't blame him for that, because he's not a centre forward. He wasn't good against United. He wasn't good against Forest. He wasn't good against West Ham. He wasn't good against PSV the other night, at home. So that's as much as I can say. Finley says, this striker talk is nonsense now. There is no solution, as you said, Tom Martinelli up front, Calafiori Moreno, and all this nonsense will never work in a title-winning sense. That is the reality we find ourselves in. Arsenal, the likelihood of Arsenal winning a striker. I wish we could win a striker. Winning the league with the options that we have is just not realistic. The problem is that Arsenal obviously needed that player last summer. We couldn't get them. And there are reasons why we couldn't get them. We wanted to, but we couldn't. January is a different story. As I say this time and time again, and I'll die on this hill, I don't think there was any player that we could realistically get in January that was going to win Arsenal the title. It would have certainly helped, and we would have been better than we are now. But I don't think there's anybody that would have won us the title coming in. But I do think that we could have gone out and signed somebody in the short term on a temporary loan just to give us something else, so we didn't have to put Mikel Moreno up front. Because no matter how many people tell me, well, who would you have got? Oh, Alvaro Morata, he's not great. Well, no, but he is better than Mikel Moreno. So that for me is the crux of the January issue. The January issue is the fact that we did nothing was a colossal failure. And without a doubt is one of the big reasons why Jason Ato is not looking likely at all to get that lead position in the sporting director role, despite having done some good things, which are obviously behind the scenes and working with Edu, and more so there's Zubimendi stuff. But Andrea Berti is getting that role and not Jason Ato, in part because of January, in my opinion. January was a failure, and that was the only front view we got of what Jason Ato could do when he leads that position. And while there may have been suggestions that the club were, happy with the considered approach he had, you can be considered, you can be cautious, but if you don't do anything, that's a failure. So that's ultimately kind of where that situation is. Patrick says, is there any news on if Partey and Jorginho are likely to stay? If they don't, then that's two midfield signings we have to make instantly, and probably would need to do more on the forward area. Partey and Jorginho, I'm almost certain will go. And so that's, I think that there is obviously a young guy coming through, Max Dowman, that you have to consider, but is he box to box? Is he attacking midfielder? He's still very young. I do not want to put a pin in the idea of he's this position, because I think things can change. So I think you have to consider that. But there have been suggestions that Zubimendi is not the only midfielder that Arsenal may move for. You have Declan Rice. You have potentially Zubimendi coming in. You've got players at the club as well. That Zinchenko could stay. There's not a guarantee that he goes. He could stay. He could therefore be a midfield option, as he has done. And I think he's done all right. I think he's started to prove me a bit wrong regarding his feeling and my feeling about him in midfield. I think he's doing all right when playing in midfield, Zinchenko. So, there's definitely options. Arthur says, as a journalist, do you think Gary Cottrell gets under Arteta's skin? Oh, I love Gary Cottrell. He honestly makes me laugh so much. And there's some things he's done where I've cringed. I'll happily say that to Gary. the goalkeeper stuff in the chat. But I think it's great entertainment. I think it's light-hearted. Of course, if you watch the press conference yesterday, Gary started it off by making a light-hearted joke about the Sky interview that Arteta did with Arteta. I think he done a one-on-one interview with him after the press conference as well, where that may get talked about. So I guess look out for that interview on Sky if and when that comes out. I don't know the contents of it, but that might come up. I mean, it would make sense to, wouldn't it? But does it? I mean, I think journalists in general can get under Arteta's skin. I think I've got under Arteta's skin at times with some of my questions I've asked him. I asked him after I think it was the West Ham game about the centre forward position and the fact that you're playing Marino up front. Does that show that, you were right and vindicated to be calling for a centre forward in the January window? I think that got under his skin. Ultimately, Arteta is a very interesting character and individual to engage with, ask questions to, get bitten back at times. I think that he's tried to mellow a bit, and I think he's tried to be more engaging as the season has gone on, in particular this year, especially in some very hard times. But I actually think the Sky interview situation was very much more so it was very much a, what's the word? Like, I think, in fact, there may have been a section in the embargo about it. Let me see if I can find it. Let me find whether or not there was anything in the embargo about it, because I feel like there was something mentioned that Arteta did speak about. I can't find it. That's really annoying. Yeah, I can't find it. That's a shame. I thought he spoke about this. I thought he said something. Maybe it was even in the every word section. Was it in the every word section? I'm just scrolling now. I know this is, as I always say, thrilling viewing when I'm trying to find something. But yeah, I can't unfortunately find what I was looking for. Interview. Let's see if it comes up. Anything with that? No. If I write Sky, no, nothing comes up. I thought there was something said in the presser, but yeah. Clive's come back at me, said, exactly in this context, he has done a great job for us, and his coach in this situation would not choose. He didn't sign for us to be a centre. Again, it is context. Has he done a great job in the context of playing a role that is not his? No, I don't think he has. I think he's done a job. If he had done a great job, he would have done more for me. Like, you can still argue that he hasn't done a great job despite playing a role that is not his. He's done okay in a role that is not his. I just wouldn't go as far as you would, Clive, in saying he's done a great job. Not for me. Personally, not for me. Matt says, Tom, do a poll. Are you Team Tom or Team Clive regarding Marino as a striker? Oh, we don't need to do that. we don't need to do that. I don't need a popularity contest to tell me that Clive's right. I don't need that. I don't need that at all. Ashley says, if we buy Zubi, second midfielder free, first year, got to be a Rice profile. Odegaard, Ethan Marino, Zubi is too slow. Going to get overrun. Partey's pace and strength combo is better than Zubi and Marino, and that says a lot. I forgot about Marino. Yeah, obviously he's somebody that is an option for us in midfield. John says, Arteta's job is to manage the team. Your jobs as journalists is to ask tough and challenging questions, and emotions can get in the way. Without, there are times where, the game's finished, and I'm sitting there going, we've lost against West Ham, and I am, as a fan, fuming like with what I've seen. If I ask a question in the style that a fan would ask, or in my head, like as a fan would ask, I'm probably not going to get invited back to another press conference. That's just not the way it goes. You have to be professional. You have to try and ask questions a certain way. Also, you have to try and preempt the answer you're going to get at times, because you don't want to ask a question that's going to get an answer like, do you think that we should sign Benjamin Sesko, Mikel? Would you rather have Alexander Isak in your side? You're not going to get a good answer, and these are all questions that we'd love to know the answer to. Are you going to sign a striker in the summer? How much money have you got to spend? Are you going to sign a new contract? Just give me the specific date that Bukayo Saka is going to come back. These aren't going to get answers. that we want. And so you have to try and preempt the answer as well. And so I'm still learning. I'm still doing what I can. I'm never going to be perfect at that. There's some questions I've asked I've not been happy with afterwards. There's some questions I've asked where I've been very happy with the answer, like the question I asked yesterday about Winery and Lewis Skelly being split apart. I really like the answer he gave me. Yes, it's never going to be perfect. I'm still learning this role. I'm still learning how to get the best answers or whatever from him. But yeah, it's very difficult at times to, after a game when your team have lost, to not go into fan mode and be like, what on earth were you thinking with that decision, that substitution? What on earth were you thinking about? Like, there is, it's sometimes it is. And ultimately, I have to, in some ways, bow to the knowledge that he knows more than I do. He is always going to know more than I do. He's a coach. I'm not a coach. I'm a fan. I'm a journalist. I'm asking questions. He knows more than us. Like, his understanding of the game, of game states. I was listening to someone talk to me the other day about coaching and how Lee Carsley had talked about pressing. And we always think about like how Ødegaard presses on his own at the top at times or with the help of the centre forward. But what we don't think about is we're watching the ball on the television screen or in the ground. We're watching where it was close to the ball. When Ødegaard is pressing, Arteta has coached his team. The other 10 players on the pitch all have jobs in those specific situations, or when England are pressing and whatever is going on. Lee Carsley is getting the players, or now Thomas Tuchel is getting the players to press. All those different players have a different job. When Arsenal are in the ball in the right quadrant, every single other player has got a job in that moment. When we've got the ball in the box, every player's got a job. When other teams are attacking us, every player has a specific job for that specific situation. It's so detailed. It's so elevated. It's such of a high grade standard of what the players, the team do, that we can sit here and say, why didn't you bring on this guy? In the most Neanderthalic like way of looking at football, saying if we'd have made that sub, we might have won the game. And in reality is maybe, but in our minds, that's just that player coming on and being better in that player in that position at doing that job, right? Or having a different impact in the game later on. No matter how many videos people can put out with circles and arrows and lines and tactical videos, or pretend to be experts like I have for so many years, knowing tactics and knowing what's going on, we're never going to know. We're never, ever going to know the finer details of things because we're not there. We don't watch training. We're not in the meetings. We're not in the coaching room. We're not hearing what Arteta's really doing. Even the All or Nothing documentary gives us a tiny percentile of what actually goes on. And you have to bow to that knowledge at the end of the day. You have to bow to the fact that you don't know more than them. And as soon as you start to look like that you think that you do know more than them, you're getting into very, very dangerous territory. Very dangerous, arrogant territory. So at no point, you can have an opinion. You can think that some player should have come on instead of somebody else, or we shouldn't have signed this guy, or we shouldn't have gone with this formation, or we should have changed things sooner, or we're being a bit too stubborn with things right now, or you want to see something different. No problem. But at the end of the day, if you're sitting there and saying, I think I know better, I could do a better job than this guy, or I'm going to ask him a question which makes me think that I look like I would know what I'm doing in his position, you're going to look stupid. You're going to look really stupid. So it's about finding that balance, and being critical, scrutinizing, having an opinion, but also being very understanding that you're never, ever, ever in a million years going to know as much as them. Ever. Doesn't mean that they can't make mistakes and you can't call them out on it or identify those mistakes. But bottom line, you're not as good as they are. You don't know as much as they do. I don't know as much as they do. And you have to balance your opinion and your scrutiny with that context. I didn't mean to go on that type of rant. That was really passionate. but it's important to understand, I think, that point of view. Clive says, context is everything. Sterling, if better, would have played. So we need an emergency move, and it's been decent. Maybe not great. I mean, if Sterling's the bar, Clive, I'd take Calafiori there. I'd put Saliba up there over Sterling prior to PSV. The PSV game gave me a little bit of a pause for thought, but it wasn't as a centre forward. He played well in that wide right position in the first half. Second half, he trailed off. But look, If Sterling was better, he would have played there. Yeah, sure, but he's not. So he didn't. Kieran says, thoughts on Williams' uptake in form? People were understandably cautious signing him as he's had 8 goals and assists in 29. Now he has 8 in his last 7. Seems to have got past the injury issues that he was playing through as well. Look, Nico Williams, I said this last summer. I said last summer, Nico Williams would represent one of the best signings that Arsenal could make. It would be one of the signings of the summer if Arsenal signed him. In January, he'd had a poor start to the season. But I think I've come to understand by speaking to Sid Lowe, by listening to people like Graham Hunter, who watch Nico Williams week in, week out, know the guy like the back of their hand, having watched and dedicated their lives to Spanish football, that if you want a wide player that's going to score you 20 plus goals, Nico Williams is not that guy. That's not what you're signing Nico Williams to do. If you want a Mohamed Salah, you don't sign Nico Williams. You just don't, because he's never going to do what he's never going to be Mohamed Salah. But what Nico Williams potentially gives Arsenal is a much greater tactical option that's extra levels of creativity, extra levels of speed, elevates us in transition, and provides more service to a centre forward that we dream of signing in the summer. That's what you do when you sign Williams. You're not signing a guy that becomes Mohamed Salah. You're not signing a guy that becomes Arjen Robben. You're signing a wide playmaker that gives you goals at times, yes, more perhaps than Martinelli can do, but probably not a lot more. But more importantly, makes better decisions, makes us more dangerous in transition. And I think the decisions point there is key. I think he's a better decision maker than Martinelli is at a slightly younger age. I think only a year or so, if even that. But and I think ultimately might mesh better into that team and gives us a bit more. So that's why I like the idea of Nico Williams. The issue with Nico Williams is his wage. That's a big, big problem because he's on a huge amount of money at Athletic Club because they can afford to pay their players huge sums of money because they don't really spend too much on transfer fees and they only sign Basque players. And that means that when we sign him, if we sign him, when we sign him, because we don't know if that's going to happen, but yeah, it's tricky. Is he a right or left winger? He's more of a left-sided player, John, but he can play on the right, but he's more of the left. He leans to the left of the equation. Maybe why I like him so much. John says, my signings to maximise the summer window. Sane and Jonathan David, on a free. Sesko, 70, Zubimendi, 50. Williams, 45. I mean, Williams' release clause is more than that. It's about 52. 116 for 5 players. Sell some others. Release some more. Oh, John, if it was only that easy, eh? If only it was that simple. Andy says, Sane is past with his injury struggles. That will reoccur. Semenyo has barely any. Semenyo has barely any end product. Nico would be far the best signing, opening up oppositions. And if you put a Sesko at 9, wow. Yeah, it's definitely more. Clive says, great show, Tom. It's great because I'm disagreeing with him. That's the reason. When I disagree with Clive, it's suddenly a better show to the popular listener. You know. Fuad says, Tom, what's your ideal 8s for next season? This is the most complicated, simple question of Arsenal's next season for me. The left 8 position, I think, is the most high potential role in this Arsenal team. Centre forwards, there's definitely loads of potential to get from there. But I think it's fairly obvious what that centre forward potential is. It's goals. It's improving the outlay there. It's improving the game. Not by loads, because ultimately I think if you add a 30, 40 goal a season striker there, goals will go down in other areas. You can only score so many goals. Arsenal broke records of goal scoring with Havertz up front and with, Jesus up front. They broke records of scoring with Trossard up front, with Nketiah up front. We broke our scoring record with 88 goals, beat that with 90 goals the following season with Havertz there for half a campaign. You don't need a 30, 40 goal a season striker to score loads of goals, but you do need a lot of goals from other areas. I think the left 8 position is the position where we can get the most growth, the most improvement that improves the wider context of the team. I don't know if that is Declan Rice at the moment. If you haven't heard Anthony, whenever I say Declan Rice now, I think about Anthony Mackie saying Declan Rice. It is so glorious. If you haven't watched it, I'm not going to try and replicate it. If you haven't watched it, every single time I say Declan Rice, I just can't help but think of Anthony Mackie saying his name when he was given something in a press junket ahead of the Captain America movie. But Declan Rice, for me, could be that guy. But I'm not 100% convinced yet if he is. I think he's had an up and down season. I think he was better at 6 last season than he has been at 8 this season. I think he was better at 8 last season than he has been at 8 this season as well. I think he was better last season. I really think that there is something to be said about the idea of a 8 that gives you a little bit more going forwards, a little bit more De Bruyne, Silva payoff. I'm really curious to see if Nwaneri and Odegaard could play together in the middle. People talk about when Saka comes back, when does Nwaneri get his minutes? I would like to see Odegaard and Nwaneri centrally with Rice behind, Saka, Martinelli, and a centre forward. I'd love to see that, just to see what it would do, to see how offensive and how creative and how dangerous we would look, and also how defensively vulnerable it could make us in some ways. But I think that position is very, very interesting to see where we can grow from the left 8 and how it goes. It could be that Max Dowman goes there, says Jordan. Maybe. Pima says, Tom, I like your hat. Where'd you get it from? The Arsenal website. It's their Aries collect. I don't know if it's still in stock. They've released so much merchandise that I don't even know if it's in stock anymore. Shall I have a quick look? I wear this hat all the time. I love it. Scrolling down. Doesn't look like it. Do like that woolly hat. I'm gonna see. This is dangerous. Me scrolling down this because it's going to make me want to buy more. Yeah, I don't know if indeed it's still in stock or not. If I type in Aries, I don't know if the hat is in stock. Doesn't look like it. No. Does not look like it is in stock at all. Sorry to disappoint. There's some things left, but it doesn't look like there's much else in stock. Oh, the hoodie's been discounted, but it's not in a large. That's a shame. Some of them are quite out there, to be fair. I'm not surprised that it didn't necessarily sell out. But some of it is really quite nice. But it is quite out there, to be fair, as well. So, yeah, I don't think you can buy it anymore. Sorry. Maybe on the second-hand market, you'll be able to get hold of it. Anyway, why is my phone blowing up? So many people text me all of a sudden. It's probably a cue to wrap things up. I've got to go shopping. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, people. Enjoy your Saturday. If you're having a day off, great. I am. I'm going to enjoy myself having a day off today. Back on it tomorrow, of course. Arsenal-Chelsea will be back with you tomorrow morning, bright and early, to preview the game that takes place at 1:30 o'clock in the afternoon. Love an early kickoff. Absolutely love one. We've not had an early kickoff in ages. I love an early kickoff. And the problem I've got is that usually like a 12 or 12:30 kickoff at the Emirates means cook breakfast. I don't think that a 1:30 kickoff is early enough that they will do breakfast. I know. Tiny violins. Get the tiny violins out for me, people, because I'm sad. I said it at the presser yesterday, and I got absolute stick for it. But I love the cooked breakfast when it's an early kickoff. But I think people are going to be arriving at 11:30, maybe 12. I think it'll be lunchtime stuff. We will see. I will report back on Monday, of course. But thank you for listening. Have a fantastic day. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy, and, of course, respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.